In the turbulent current of modern Chinese history, one name stands out as the harbinger of a new era. Sun Yat-sen, revered as the father of the nation, Guofu, of the Republic of China. He was not only the initiator of the revolution that overthrew the Qing Dynasty, but also the first to envision and articulate a blueprint for a democratic, modern, and sovereign China. With his famous three principles of the people, nationalism, democracy, and the people's livelihood, Sun Yat-sen laid the ideological foundation for a new nation at a time when China was descending into crisis, partitioned and ravaged by foreign powers. His life and legacy embody a courageous generation of intellectuals who were rooted in Confucian tradition while embracing progressive Western ideals. From a village boy in Guangdong, educated in Hawaii and Hong Kong, to a revolutionary navigating the stormy world of politics, Sun Yat-sen experienced nearly every upheaval of early 20th century China: failed uprisings, years of exile, fragile political alliances, and ultimately, death with his dream of democracy still unfulfilled. Yet even though the republic he helped establish was short-lived, the ideals he left behind continue to resonate, not only in China but across the historical landscape of modern Asia. Sun Yat-sen was born on November 12, 1866 in Quiheng Village, Shangshan County, present-day Zhongshan, Guangdong Province, a region steeped in Confucian tradition and patriotic spirit. He grew up in a hard-working peasant family. His father was a humble laborer, and his mother a diligent, strict woman, devoted to raising her children with discipline and moral integrity. Though the family was far from wealthy, education was always held in the highest regard, seen as the only path to transcend the stagnation of a feudal society locked in decline. From an early age, Sun Yat-sen displayed remarkable intelligence, a thirst for knowledge, and an unusually critical mind. While most children of his age unquestioningly accepted traditional rituals and hierarchies, young Sun would boldly ask, "Why were emperors born to rule, and why must the people obey them without question?" This sensitivity to injustice and his deep curiosity about the world planted the early seeds of his reformist ideals. At the age of 13, a turning point arrived. His elder brother, Sun Mei, who was working in Hawaii, sponsored him to study abroad. From a poor rural village in Guangdong, the boy stepped into a radically different world. One where kings were not worshipped, where rigid traditions did not bind society, and where people believed in freedom, equality, and government of the people, by the people, for the people. At Iolani School in Honolulu, Sun Yat-sen studied English, natural sciences, history, and was particularly influenced by the Protestant ethos, which would later shape his sense of personal duty and the idea of salvation for the nation. It was also here that he began to clearly see the alarming gap between traditional China and the modern West, and formed the conviction that China must change, or else be forever dominated and carved up by foreign powers. After several years of study in Hawaii, Sun Yat-sen returned to his hometown fluent in English, and with a vision far beyond his teenage years. But upon confronting the stark realities of life back in China, he was struck by the deep decay of Chinese society at the time: rampant official corruption, widespread poverty, and outdated ideologies that stifled all progress. He was no longer just a boy who asked questions. He had begun to nurture a burning desire to bring change, not just to his village, but to an entire nation. By 1884, Sun moved to Hong Kong, where he enrolled at Diocesan Boys' School, and later continued to the Hong Kong College of Medicine for Chinese, from which he graduated in 1892 with a degree in Western medicine. This was a pivotal phase of his life. While medicine gave him the tools to heal individuals, it was political thought, particularly from foreign books and Western missionaries, that ignited in him the fire to heal the nation. Sun Yat-sen once said, "As a doctor, I can save one life at a time, but if I can change the destiny of my country, I can save millions." It was during this period that he began participating in secret discussions and writing reform proposals to the King Court, which were consistently ignored. Realizing that change from within was impossible, Sun fully embraced the idea of revolution to overthrow the Qing Dynasty. In 1894, after China's humiliating defeat in the First Sino-Japanese War, Sun founded the revived China Society, Xinhai in Hawaii, marking the official beginning of his political journey. His motto at the time was simple yet profound: revive China. It was a modest first step, but one of historic significance, taken by a young man who had lived between two worlds, East and West, and chose to stand at the crossroads to carve a new path for his nation's future. When Sun Yatsen founded the revived China Society in 1894, China was in the midst of a profound crisis. The Qing Dynasty was decaying from within, Western powers in Japan were carving up Chinese territory, and the people were mired in poverty and despair. For Sun, the time for reform had passed. The only solution was to overthrow the feudal regime entirely. In 1895, he orchestrated the Guangzhou Uprising, a carefully planned military coup intended to trigger a chain reaction of rebellion against the Qing. However, the plan was discovered before it could launch. The result was a devastating failure. Many of Sun's closest comrades were arrested and executed. Sun himself narrowly escaped capture, beginning a long period of exile that would take him across the globe. Despite the crushing defeat of the 1895 uprising, Sun Yat-sen never abandoned his ideals. Together with his comrades in the Tongmenghui United League, he continued to devise and lead a series of uprisings across southern China, driven by an unyielding determination to spark a nationwide revolutionary movement. The Zhennan Uprising, 1907. In December 1907, the Zhennan Uprising, in what is now Guangxi Province, was carried out by a group of Tongmenghui members under the remote direction of Sun Yat-sen. The goal was to seize several military outposts and expand revolutionary influence into the border regions near Vietnam. However, the uprising suffered from weak manpower, poor coordination, and a lack of support from the local population, leading to a swift and crushing defeat. Though small in scale, this was the first concrete revolutionary action following the founding of the Tongmenghui. It marked a significant shift from mere propaganda to direct political action. The Huizhou Uprisings, 1900–1907. Even before Zhennan, Sun Yat-sen had directed an earlier attempt in Huizhou, Guangdong, in 1900, known as the First Huizhou Uprising. With support from the forces of General Zheng Shihong, Sun planned to capture the city. However, the plot was exposed and quickly crushed. In 1905, Sun founded the Tongmenghui United League in Japan, a revolutionary organization of national scope uniting various patriotic groups under the common goal of overthrowing the Qing Dynasty and establishing a republic. Subsequent uprisings followed in Zhennan, Huizhou, and later Huanghuagang. While all ended in failure, each attempt expanded public support and deeply planted the seed of democracy in the hearts of China's emerging generation. In 1907, the Second Huizhou Uprising was launched, this time in coordination with insurgents from the Lijiu Peninsula. But the Qing court had been forewarned and arranged tight defensive preparations. Once again, the revolutionaries were defeated. Several leaders were killed, and the survivors retreated toward the Vietnam-China border. These repeated failures did not deter Sun Yat-sen. Instead, they only strengthened his conviction that more blood would need to be shed before a nation lulled to sleep by tradition and fear could be awakened. The Huanghuagang Uprising, 1911. The Huanghuagang Uprising was the most poignant and heroic revolt during the early days of the Tongmenghui and served as the direct prelude to the Xinhai Revolution. On April 27, 1911, more than 100 revolutionary fighters, mainly students and young intellectuals from the Tongmenghui, launched an attack on the Governor-General's office in Guangzhou. They were led by Huang Xing, a close confidant of Sun Yat-sen, and their goal was to seize the administrative center of Guangdong Province and ignite a broader revolutionary uprising across southern China. However, the operation was exposed shortly before it was set to begin. Qing troops launched a fierce counterattack surrounding and storming the site. The battle was short but bloody. 86 revolutionaries were killed, many of them beheaded, their bodies dismembered. These martyrs were later buried together at the Huanghuagang Mausoleum, which became a powerful and enduring symbol of revolutionary sacrifice. At the time, Sun Yatsen was in the United States, raising funds for the revolution. Upon hearing the news, he was deeply moved and called the uprising the most radiant sacrifice for the ideals of Chinese democracy. Then, in October 1911, a small spark in Wuchang erupted into the Xinhai Revolution, which shook all of China. Although Sun was not present at the uprising, still traveling abroad to gain international support, his name was invoked across the revolutionary forces as their spiritual leader and de facto father of the Republic. By the time Sun returned to Shanghai later that year, the centuries-old monarchy was already teetering on collapse. The Qing Dynasty, which had ruled China for over 2,000 years, was on the verge of ending. Sun Yat-sen had been fundraising among overseas Chinese communities in the U.S., and upon hearing of the Wuchang uprising, he immediately began his return journey, traveling through Europe before arriving in Shanghai, where he was unanimously hailed as the spiritual leader of the revolution. On January 1, 1912, in Nanjing, Sun Yat-sen was officially elected provisional president of the Republic of China, the first republic in Asian history, marking the end of over 2,000 years of feudal monarchy on Chinese soil. At his inauguration ceremony, he solemnly declared, "I vow to dedicate everything to the nation, to sacrifice myself for the people. Even if my body is torn apart, I shall not retreat." A provisional constitution was drafted, enshrining revolutionary principles deeply rooted in democratic ideals: sovereignty of the people, separation of powers, equality, freedom of religion, and the protection of private property. All these reflected the core of the three principles of the people that Sun had conceived since his youth: nationalism, liberation from foreign domination; democracy, establishing a constitutional system without kings or emperors; people's livelihood, ensuring social welfare and economic security for all. Sun Yat-sen was not only a revolutionary, but also a statesman who knew when to yield power for the greater good. Less than 3 months after assuming the presidency, he voluntarily stepped down, agreeing to hand over the position to Yuan Shikai, a powerful Qing general and political figure, on the condition that Yuan forced the Qing imperial court to officially abdicate. On February 12, 1912, Emperor Puyi, known as the Xuantong Emperor, issued an official edict of abdication, marking the definitive end of China's imperial era. Sun Yat-sen's long-cherished dream of a democratic China had taken its first real step into reality. After being forced to relinquish the presidency to Yuan Shikai in 1912, Sun Yat-sen had initially hoped that personal sacrifice for the greater good would help preserve the republic. However, the harsh reality of politics quickly shattered his idealism. Yuan Shikai failed to implement the promised democratic reforms. Instead, he manipulated the political system, suppressed revolutionary forces, and by 1915 declared himself emperor of a restored monarchy under the name of the Empire of China, Great Chinese Empire. Once again, Sun Yat-sen left China, this time to Japan, where he began to develop a broader long-term vision, not just to lead a revolution, but to build a modern political party capable of organizing, governing, and defending the ideals of the Republic. In 1914, he officially established a new political organization called the Chinese Revolutionary Party. Its goal was to oppose Yuan Shikai, restore the Republic, and crucially, overcome the major weaknesses of earlier revolutionary movements: lack of organization, poor discipline, and no clear strategic direction. This party would later become the direct predecessor of one of the most influential political forces in modern Chinese history, the Kuomintang, KMT, or Chinese Nationalist Party. By October 1919, after Yuan's death and several years of national chaos, Sun Yat-sen officially reorganized the party into the Chinese Nationalist Party with the three principles of the people as its core political doctrine. This was the first time in modern Chinese history that a political party was built with a defined platform, structured hierarchy, and internal discipline, modeled after Western political institutions. At this point, Sun Yat-sen was no longer just a revolutionary. He had become a party builder and a strategic political leader, determined to reunify China under a new, functional system. However, the founding of the republic did not lead to peace. Instead of national unity, the collapse of the Qing Dynasty gave rise to warlord factions who divided China like feudal fiefdoms, rendering the central government weak and ineffective. Sun Yatsen understood that to reunify the country, he needed both a strong political party and a disciplined military force. But in the early 1920s, the Nationalist Party was still too weak to achieve that vision. Meanwhile, the newly established Soviet Union, following the October Revolution, sought to expand its influence into the East and saw a strategic opportunity in China. Beginning in 1923, through the mediation of Soviet advisor Mikhail Borodin, Sun agreed to form a united front with the Chinese Communist Party, which at the time was still a small group with only a few hundred members. This marked a pivotal moment in history. The first united front between the Kuomintang, KMT, and the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, lasting from 1924 to 1927, was officially formed. Despite deep ideological differences, both sides set aside their disputes to pursue a larger shared goal, ending the fragmentation of China, unifying the nation, and resisting imperialist forces. Strategic collaboration, Whampoa Military Academy and the Northern Expedition. To bring the alliance into concrete action, in 1924, Sun Yatsen established the Whampoa Military Academy in Guangzhou, aiming to train a new generation of revolutionary military officers, men equipped with modern training and deeply imbued with nationalist ideals. Chiang Kai-shek was appointed as the academy's first commandant. Many of the academy's graduates would later become prominent generals on both sides, nationalist and communist. Several key Communist Party members were invited to teach at Whampoa as well. Zhou Enlai, for example, who would later become the first premier of the People's Republic of China. At the same time, the KMT restructured itself following the Leninist model, a unified party with democratic centralism, clear division of roles, and strict internal discipline, a significant departure from its earlier, more loosely organized form. After Sun Yat-sen's death in 1925, Chiang Kai-shek rose to power and in 1926 launched the Northern Expedition, a military campaign to crush the northern warlords and reunify China. During this campaign, KMT forces were supported by workers' and peasants' movements organized by the Communists, especially in industrial centers like Shanghai and Hunan province. Tensions beneath the surface. Cooperation without trust. Though nominally allies, the KMT and CCP were riddled with mutual suspicion. The KMT, particularly under Chiang Kai-shek, feared that the Communists intended to seize power and undermine the republic from within. The Communists, backed by the Soviet Union, doubted the KMT's commitment to radical revolution, viewing it as dominated by bourgeois and landlord interests. As Communist influence rapidly grew, especially in urban workers' movements and rural uprisings, cooperation became increasingly strained, foreshadowing the eventual rupture of the United Front. Before he could witness the realization of his dream to unify the nation, Sun Yat-sen passed away on March 12, 1925 in Beijing, after a long battle with liver cancer. His death sent shockwaves throughout China, not only because the country had lost a revolutionary leader, but because a spiritual symbol of the era had come to an end. Yet the legacy he left behind, a revolutionary ideology, a modern political party, and a firm belief in the democratization of China, became the foundation for generations to come. His tomb was built at Sun Yat-sen Mausoleum in Nanjing, a place still regarded as the sacred ground of the Republic's spirit. Inscribed on his gravestone are the words, "The revolution is not yet complete. All my compatriots must continue to strive." A symbol beyond division. What makes Sun Yat-sen unique is that he is revered by both the Kuomintang, KMT, and the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, as the father of the nation. Even though these two parties later descended into a bloody civil war, the image of Sun Yat-sen has been preserved on both sides as a symbol of national unity, revolutionary enlightenment, and the founding spirit of modern China. To the Kuomintang, he is the founder, the soul of the revolution that overthrew the feudal system, and the architect of the First Republic. To the Chinese Communist Party, Despite ideological differences, he is still honored as a forerunner who awakened patriotism, fought imperialism, and initiated the democratic transformation of China. A lasting influence on modern Chinese history. His political philosophy, the three principles of the people, nationalism, independence, democracy, people's rights, people's livelihood, social welfare, continues to inspire modern policies, not only in the Republic of China, Taiwan, but also in the People's Republic of China, where it is adapted and referenced in various ways. In Taiwan, the Kuomintang still upholds the three principles as its core political ideology and regards Sun Yatsen as the father of Chinese democracy. In mainland China, he is featured in school textbooks, honored with monuments across the country, and commemorated annually, a rare status for a figure associated with both regimes. Sun Yatsen, a bridge between past and future. Amid the turbulent tides of modern Chinese history, Sun Yat-sen stands as a bridge, linking a backward feudal society with a nation striving for modernization. He was the first to dream of a democratic, independent, and civilized China, and the first to act relentlessly to make that dream a reality, despite decades of failure, exile, and sacrifice. The legacy he left behind is not a permanent regime, but an unshakable will, the will to change the destiny of a nation through knowledge, through action, and through faith in the future. Thank you so much for watching and listening. If you enjoyed this content and found it interesting, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos.